Well, I got the Jeep on the lift today. Again, no surprise. Front diff is repaired from the last episode, but the major work for today is mostly revolving around suspension. Got some new coils. The old coils have been in the vehicle for probably long before I owned it, so let's say 15 years. And obviously I made like some spacer thing to go at the top to take it up to about 6-inch lift. But I've actually got some Skyjacker dual rate coils. Now I know metal cloak are better, but it was just too expensive for me to get them here. Well, here we go. So that's basically it. So it's 6.5-inch dual rate coil from Skyjacker. I don't know how these will be. I've watched quite a few videos. The metal cloak video basically says they're crap. The Skyjacker video says they're good. When life puts obstacles in your way, Skyjack off. All right, let's get started. Jacking me off, Skyjacker style. The first thing I got to do really is I got to sort out the old sort of steering stops, because that one's worse than the other one. Don't forget to check out our latest customer testimonials. Skyjacker jacking you off. Right, let's get this. That's looking a lot better. I must have ground a bit too much off back when I had 35s. It's got about 4 mil between the links, so that's good. Let's drop this bad boy down. Should be able to get this out. Yeah, should be able to. The coils are quite easy to get out of this, because obviously it's like droopier than an old man's ball bag, so those can pop out. See that water dripping down there? That's why I always drill a hole through that bump stop. It's a major rust issue on the XJ actually. When you push these bump stops in, they basically block up in here, and water can get in up there from rain, just from rain dripping on the bonnet, the hood, and it fills up in here, and these rot out quite badly. Probably what's hanging it up. So look, water's still dripping out of there. You wouldn't think it, but all this water on the floor going into that drain had just built up in there. I checked the hole in the bump stop. It was actually blocked, so I've unblocked it now and just drilled it out a little bit more again. But the other one was fine. So that's it, the coils are out. In all fairness to these coils, these are rough stuff, rough country. I might have said rough stuff earlier, sorry. Rough country 4.5-inch lifted coils. And as I said, they've probably been on this Jeep for the 12 years I've had it, and about 3 years before that. So let's say 15 years of service. It's not bad. And they've actually broken in pretty nice. But you know, it is time to swap them out really and get a new coil for my vehicle. So yeah, like I said, there's no need for this stuff now. Now that is just a bit of cosmetic. It's just like some 2.5-inch pipe that I put over that to make it look a little bit fancier. This stuff can come out forward. God damn. There it is, the Crapo Spacer 9000, held up though.
recently? No? Then you need the new Jack Off Extreme from Skyjacker. Jacking you off. Each process separately based on the clue, no back guarantee. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, I've just been busy cleaning up the axle, really, just tidying bits up. There were some contact points for the coils on my sway bar mount supports on the axle side, so it was only a really slight bit of contact, but while I'm there, I might as well get it sorted. So I've ground that out. There's a few contact points at the top as well, got rid of those. I haven't honestly knew they were even there or even heard them, but maybe just under certain circumstances they make contact, but better it doesn't altogether. And I'm just getting a bump stop system sorted that can just kind of make life a bit easier for me. So let's just ignore that sick weld for a sec. That's pretty, right? The problem is I welded it crap before and then it broke off. So I've just literally bird crapped it to make sure it doesn't come off again. But I've had to do that to the bottom of the hockey puck. So this one's always going to remain on the bottom. And the point being is I can add these in through the gaps between the coil, like the twists in the coil, and then I can just add more bump stops. So I'm sort of setting myself up for later, really, because I'm going to have to add one more of these, and I don't have it at the moment. The point being now is I'm lowering it without coils because I want to check what kind of bump stopping I'm going to need to do. Like what is the maximum stuff of that 37 on the front end going up into the wheel well? What does the shock look like? All that kind of stuff, really, because when these tyres get studded, you really don't want them to rub because the studs absolutely shred anything they touch. So you really do want a bit of space. So the front axle is sitting on that jack there, and it's everything stuffed up as far as it can go according to the shocks. Now that isn't ideal, obviously. Kind of those shocks did originally come with a bump stop built into them at the top. I took it away. I think I'm going to go back to the standard shock setup. The reason I did it this way was so I wouldn't have to buy specific XJ shocks. I could use whatever shocks I could get. But now the issue is like this can go up a lot higher here if the tyre is, let's say it can go to about there if the tyre's just kind of straight, but as soon as you turn, that's the problem. On a summer tyre, I don't mind it rubbing a little bit like that, like on the back there. That's fine, that wheel well is just a plastic wheel well. At the front, I could trim some of this away in the bumper. I don't necessarily want to do that either because it's in the summer really where you're doing like things that require the suspension to articulate. In the winter, you kind of just plug in through snow and it doesn't really matter. So I'm actually going to leave it like this, but probably swap the shock out. But I'm just going to check the bump stop out. So originally I had about 4 hockey pucks worth in there. And in all honesty, I think that's still okay with this setup. I think I was a bit generous with the 35. Well, I've been pretty busy. I had a look at the vehicle on its own weight, and these coils are definitely much softer than the rough country coils, and that's fine. And they are working how they should, really. If you look at the coil when it's under its own weight, the top part is compressed, so I'm guessing that's the softer part of the coil, harder bit beneath. But my main issue was, previously and still is now, is the curve in the coil. And that's my fault. When I cut and turn the C's on the axle, I didn't relocate the spring perches, basically, where they engage on the axle. So when the axle rotated with the pumpkin like that to get the perfect pinion angle, and the C's went back, the spring perches rotated too. And it just makes for an unideal setup, really, like that the coil's kind of bowed, it isn't good. So I've been working away at trying to fix that. Prior to doing that, I've put the old shocks back on. And you got the bump stop at the top of the shock. It's all looking a lot better. But I've chopped up, against my will actually, the old coil. And I did check the scrap bin, and we do have coils there, but unfortunately none of them were the right size. They're all too big. And I've basically made spacers or shims and angled them so that the coil still kind of sits evenly on its base, but it's tilted back. And it's almost perfectly adjusted the coil back to not being bowed anymore. If you look at that now, compared to how it was before, that coil tower at the top with that bump stop mount was basically touching the back of the coil. Now there's some pretty even spacing. And to be fair, it's a lot easier on the rest of the world's driver's side because of the way the coil engages. The notching at the back of where the coil engages is at the back of the axle. So the front's really easy to do. You just lift it. But the front on this side here, the rest of the world's passenger side, that's the tricky side. And that's the bit I'm gonna have to kind of screw around with. And you all know I love screwing around, and what better place to be screwing around than with the Jack-Off 5000s, right? So let's get into this. So unfortunately I've had to destroy my paintwork, but I'm thinking about, instead of putting this in that recession like that, just bringing it out a little bit more like that, so the coil kind of almost is stuck in here, if you know what I mean, at the front there where the coil ends. And that might just mean that I can then put a block here, and then the coil is in its own little recess. Really, I don't want it sticking out so much because it needs surface area to sit onto, but maybe something like that, just like maybe sort of 4 mil. Jacking me, I'm jacking you, friends. Ever been jacked up in the sky? Not yet, but it's home. So it isn't going anywhere, but shame about my paint work, all that work for nothing, and I've run out of paint, so awesome. Yeah, I'm going to put a little block there, I guess, of something, and the coil will sort of sit in that recess a bit. Obviously while I'm doing this I've retracted the shocks, but I've used my brain this time, made this damp first, so it doesn't catch on fire. This is turning out to be a lot more involved than I thought it would. Obviously I used the piece of the XJ coil in there like that, and then I found in the scrap bin a slightly larger coil that seemed to be pretty perfectly encompassing and spooning the XJ coil. So I've used that there just to create like a step, really, because if you look at when the coil goes on, I'm just using the old rough country coil, I just feel like it's going to be a lot happier with just something here on the forward edge, because it just looked a little bit like it could potentially want to kind of shift a little bit under pressure. So the only thing left to do now is put a little piece here, which actually now I'm doing that, it looks horrible. Maybe put something there like that. And then basically you've got a coil that's completely locked in and well supported. This side is much easier because the engagement to stop the coil shifting is at the back, and that's why it always looks better as well. It looks straighter than the other side really when you start getting into lift kits and stuff, but that's going to sit there like that. It is rocking a little bit because I'm going to grind down some weld there just to get that seated correctly. And then there'll be a small lip there as well. I mean, that looks kind of shit, but once it's kind of sanded back and take the edges off and paint it, it's nothing really. But this one's obviously encompassed in a lot better, and it can't really go anywhere. The other one can move quite a bit. So this side's basically done, apart from a bit of grinding to get the face proper. This was supposed to be fun. This was supposed to be like, yeah, putting some new coils in, awesome. Turned into bullshit. It looks really stupid, but you know, what's important is that it works and nobody looks at it. So, but yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's going to do the job. That locks in real nice there, and there's the coils tilted back and
not going to go anywhere. It's really nice, so does the job, right?
Whew, there we go, all done. That felt like a lot more work than I wanted it to be. You know, last Christmas with Jack in my heart, very next day, jacked it away. That turned out to be a lot more work than I really thought it was going to be, but you know, it's one of the problems I've had for a while. I've not really known what to do about it. I did some Googling last night. I saw that you can actually buy bow coil correctors for like TJs and YJs, but or whatever, like other Jeeps, but I didn't see anything for the XJ, so you know, I mean, I live in Europe, so if I ordered it anyway, it'd be like really expensive and take 2 weeks. So at least there, I've got something now pretty solid, correcting the coil. I've painted the axle. I've even gone to the trouble of painting some of the French fried coloured parts black. And I'm going through a bit of a process now. You probably saw me remove that quick disconnect Ace and Hub sway bar earlier. That's actually not going to go back on this winter. I'm going to be putting on a standard sway bar and just painting it black. Those arms are all going to come off, the red arms. They're going to be painted like grey or silver. And I'm just going to kind of tone it down a bit and get rid of the McDonald's theme. I mean, I think it looks cool, and I probably will leave the knuckles orange. But anyway, time to put the coils in, hopefully for the last time. This seated up right, yeah, locked in pretty good. That is looking massively better, not as bowed, looking good. Quite happy with that distance up with the shock as well. It's a lot better. You can see that that's sat in there real nicely, so it isn't going to be going anywhere. Bump stops look good. You know, on the other side, I mean, the other side always is better because of the orientation of the coil, I think. But yeah, I need to get that drag link reconnected. Oh yeah, there you go. It's catching on the bump stop. I had a feeling there'd be some sort of thing like that. So I think I'm going to have to cut the bump stops and angle them upward. I did have a feeling on installing them it would be like that, but looking at the coil itself, like that one did look better than the other one anyway, and that it looks almost perfect. So I don't know what Metal Cloak are talking about, because they said on their video that the coils aren't closed, and they are. So they said it wasn't a true dual rate coil, because the coil at the top was open and it should be completely closed, but it looks good to me. Definitely a bit of a softer ride because I tested it yesterday. Well, I was hoping to get out and do a little bit of a test drive today, but I haven't studded my tyres yet. The weather's real crisp out there, black ice everywhere. First cold day of the year. If you get caught without studs in the tyres, if it's not a 3 Peak Mountain Snowflake tyre, then it's about £2,000 per tyre, which would make a grand total of £8,000 fined by the police, and they are floating around town at the moment stopping people, so I just can't risk it, which is a bit of a shame. There's a spot I like to go to, a very rocky track, you know, test out some suspension, flex things out, and yeah, I have to wait for another day. But yeah, interestingly enough, the vehicle also sprung a massive coolant leak this morning. One of the small gaskets on the coolant gallery on top of the head went. If you've got a small coolant leak or something that could have been one, when you get cold weather, it turns into a leak. I guess there's some science behind that I could probably try and explain. But in the end, I ended up replacing the push rods and the lifters. So I bought a load of stuff about 10 years ago, never used it. And there was some play in the lifters and the push rods were pretty worn. So I've changed that. Hopefully that's not a regrettable job. Ideally, you should be doing the hydraulic tappets as well, but that would mean removing the head in most cases, and I don't really want to do that yet. So it's looking nice with the shiny new valve cover that I put on, that I had on the back burner all painted up. And yeah, the engine's had some love. I mean, you give the Jeep an inch, it takes a mile. So it's the way it's always been with that vehicle. So it wouldn't surprise me if something else went wrong now. That's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And, you know, I certainly didn't enjoy the job, I'll be honest with you. And one regrettable thing that I screwed up out of all of this, which means I've got to come back to it again, was I did everything to align the coil and almost kind of lift the mounting point for the coil. So the coil is now like that and not like that. But I forgot about the bump stops, and I've had to shave the bump stops at the front off at an angle like that, so the coil doesn't catch on them, as you saw in that last clip when I kind of summarised what it looked like on its own weight, which is just a shit job really. And at that point I could have just made a shim and had the bump stops angled up slightly more as well, and it would have been fine, and it probably would have taken an extra 20 minutes to build that. So there we go. You live and learn, don't you? But I will come back to it anyway, because I'm going to be repainting some stuff under there, and you know, that'll come at a later date. But thanks again for watching, I really appreciate it. Sorry I couldn't get out for a drive. I did try and build an RTI ramp out of tyres in the garage to sort of show what it looked like, but it went completely to shit and didn't work. So there's another job. Maybe I should build an RTI ramp. I think my boss would probably like that too. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.